Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special live stream for Grit and Valor 1949. My name's Bruce. I work over at Megabit Publishing, and today we've got a really cool show for you where we're going to present, for the very first time, the British Isles boss, which is the first boss you'll encounter in the game. We've also got a lot more than that, so to help me with sharing all of this stuff with you, I've got two co-hosts to help do that. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. Here they are. George, could you say hello to our friends watching at home and let them know who you are?
Sure, yeah. Well, first, thanks for having us, Bruce. I'm George. I work at Milky Tea here in Liverpool as a social media manager. So we're the developer of Grit and Valor 1949, but I also work alongside Bruce and Sophie at Megabit with the community work on Grit and Valor. So yeah, I'm really excited to share what the team have been working on.
Excellent. And Sophie, would you like to give a quick intro?
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much for having us, Bruce. So I also work at Megabit Publishing as a senior community manager, and we have lots to talk about, so I can't wait for us to get started.
Fantastic. So, of course, Grit and Valor has been our our whole lives for the past few months, but there'll be people out there who haven't heard of the game yet. So, George, could you give an overview of what the game is to anyone who hasn't seen or heard of Grit before?
Sure, yeah, I'll give it a go. So Grit and Valor 1949 is a diesel punk real-time tactics roguelite, which is set in an alt history World War II. So in this timeline, the bad guys won, and our game puts you in command of an elite mech squadron in an against the odds last stand to liberate Europe. Along the way, you'll have to battle wave after wave of enemy mechs. You'll also have to upgrade your own mechs and the pilots that command them to stay one step ahead of the enemy at all times. In terms of the genre, so real-time tactics, roguelite, it represents an exciting new challenge for Milky Tea, but it's a genre that we've all been passionate about for years, so we can't wait to tell you all more about it today.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. And we'll be showing off some gameplay as well to give a full flavor of what it is, but thank you for giving that overview. So on today's show, we're going to, like I say, be showing off what the game is in real time and give you a taste of the boss itself. We're going to dive into an interview that we pre-recorded with two of the artists, from Milky Tea who actually designed the boss and the appearance of it. And we're also going to share some concept artwork and behind the scenes content as well, just to give some insight into the development of the boss itself. And then lastly, we're also going to go through some upcoming changes that Milky Tea are working on based on feedback that we received from the demos. So all of that and more to look forward to. Sophie, could you give us some information about the upcoming beta and Gleam competition?
Yes, so we do have lots of things going on. I'll start with the Gleam competition. So right now, you can sign in and try and join to win a Steam Deck with a really cool Grit and Valor exclusive skin. So you cannot get this anywhere. You have to join this giveaway for a chance to win. So all the info, we'll put that in the video description, but do join our Discord server or check out our socials. All the info's there. You just click on the Gleam link and there's a couple entry points to follow for entries to join. And also you mentioned the beta sign up. So you can now sign up for the beta. You'll be able to get into Grit and Valor, play the game, check out the latest updates, play the British Isles boss, and more. So same thing, check the video description. It's also up on the Steam forums and social. So we'll be talking a bit more about that in today's show as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So without further ado, we're going to run the trailer for anyone who hasn't seen it before, because it's a wicked trailer. And then we're going to get straight into some gameplay so you can get a flavor of what the boss is all about for yourselves. And then we'll see you back here again very soon. Bye-bye. Hi everyone, so George and I are here about to jump into some boss level gameplay. We're actually towards the end of our current run here in the mission right before the boss. George, how are you feeling so far about the run, the state of our mechs, and our chances of defeating the boss?
I'm fairly confident, you know. I think you've come through most of the British Isles relatively unscathed. The only thing I'm wary of is that command vehicle. You're gonna have to really take care of it on this penultimate mission, I think.
Yeah, that's absolutely the priority. So for anyone who's joining the stream as a bit of a newbie who hasn't gotten behind the reins of the squad before, that was a really unnecessarily fancy way of saying who hasn't played the game before. Why is the command vehicle so important?
So, the command vehicle's important because you, as the commander of your unit, you're actually inside it. So, it is game over if you lose that vehicle. The weakest of the mechs, but it's also the only one that doesn't have an offensive capability. But you can use it to complete your side objectives while you're battling the others.
Right, side objectives like the 2 radio towers on each side of the map.
Yeah.
Although
I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't risk it.
to go for them this time. Okay, alright. Yeah, I think actually I quite like the map layout that we've got here because we've got an elevated position right in the middle. It should be fairly easy to defend, so I think I'll just hold on tight and get us through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd keep to the high ground in the cover and just, yeah.
Can you explain,
play defensive.
Can you explain the advantages of the high ground and cover sounding fairly self-explanatory?
Yeah, so cover, you're protected from the enemies as long as they're not behind you. And then high ground, you've got a damage boost from any, as long as your enemy is on a lower level to you, your firepower will be superior.
Good to know. Alright, so we're already on the 3rd wave out of 4 here, so looking pretty good. And I haven't taken too much more damage than I came in with. Right, enemy flavor mech.
How are we doing abilities wise? Have you used many throughout the run?
I've only been using the abilities, to be fair. Mostly just relying on positioning, and so it might be a good time to actually use a couple of them. We can heal up our squad with the command vehicle's ability, as long as everyone's within the vicinity of the command vehicle, which is pretty good. What other abilities have we got at our disposal that you think I should be using?
So we'll find out on the boss battle, but I think your explosive mech's mines are going to come in handy.
Okay. That's a good tip. Alright, so yeah, here we are, right at the end of the British Isles region, just about ready to take on the boss. Let's go for this scenario and upgrade one of our enhancements.
Ooh. Oh, I wouldn't have gone for that.
You wouldn't have gone for that.
I'd have gone for the health. I'm really, really conscious of all that command vehicle there.
Oh no. Okay, well let's see how we do then. I wanna take a risk. Axis General. So the Axis General and their battalions will engage you in combat at this location. Alright. Here we are, we finally made it. So, right away, there he is. There's the big man. Right away, the level layout looks very different. Why is it such a peculiar shape and sort of design compared to a more standard mission?
So, with this, the first boss battle of the game, we wanted to basically flip the gameplay on its head. So this is the first time your players have been faced with a situation where there's like a threat of that boss reaching the end, which would be game over for you. So you've got to act way more offensively than you normally do. As we've seen with you playing on the previous missions, you're predominantly trying to get through unscathed, but here you don't have that luxury. You've got to go for him.
I'm already a mech down, like right away, and these other units coming in to distract me when I'm trying to attack the boss are not helping.
Yeah, so this is General Harmsworth. Like narratively, he is one of the most treacherous Axis generals, and that's his personal mech, which obviously is very, very imposing. And in addition to being absolutely ginormous with a ton of hit points, it's basically effective against every type of mech. It's got weapons to deal with everything.
Right. Yeah, and I can see that sort of indicated. It's got the usual indicator of its type above its head, but yeah, that's changing throughout the battle.
Yeah.
Oh no. Oh, this is going Pete Tong, mate. It's not a good day for the Allies. And
Yeah,
same rules apply. Like if my command vehicle goes, I'm kaput. Oh no.
Oh yeah. You've got to get that to safety.
Well, okay. Another pathetic obstacle removed. Goodbye. That did not last nearly as long as I hoped it would. Blimey, that's a challenge. That's a challenge and a half, especially for a relatively new squad who haven't had too many upgrades yet. So there's a taste, I guess, of what we're in for. What's your post-match analysis of how that went?
Yeah, I warned you about that command vehicle. I was concerned, but yeah, you lost a lot of hit points from all of your mechs very, very quickly. I think it's just that for someone who's new to the boss battle, I think like the sheer volume of hazards that you have to avoid is like it's a big shock to the system. So I think a little bit more practice, you'll get a bit further, but I don't think you got it about 40% of the way down. I think that's a fair attempt for a first run, I think.
Yeah, okay. Well, we made some progress. I'm gonna off-screen have another go at this and see if I can do better. But in the meantime, we're gonna get back to the main show. We hope you enjoyed seeing me get absolutely destroyed by General Harmsworth there. But if you do stick around towards the end, we might show a bit of gameplay where someone else has had a little bit more success than I have. So yeah, that's it. Thanks so much, George, and we'll catch you all back in the studio. Okay, well, we hope you enjoyed watching us struggle our way through fighting against the British Isles boss there. It was a lot of fun to play, and we hope you have fun with it too when you get hands-on later this year. George, what did you make of all of that, and how does this boss level compare or differ to what players can expect in a standard mission throughout their runs?
Sure. So the thing that stands out immediately is just the sheer amount of new hazards and reinforcements that you have to deal with compared to regular missions. But in terms of like design, this first boss battle forces you to play the game in a completely different way to regular missions, as you said. So whereas throughout your campaign you'll have been playing defensively, trying to come through every level unscathed, in this one there's that added sense of urgency to act offensively. So there's that peril of the boss reaching the end of the level, so you don't have the opportunity to run away and hide and duck for cover. You have to go at it. So I think juggling this with all the mortar fire, Harmsworth's reinforcements, it makes it a real like tense spectacle. Yeah, and I just really hope that players really enjoy this new dynamic that's thrown at them right at the end of the region.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most fun moments in this game are when it's just on the edge of being overwhelming and you've got all these things to juggle and you're just trying to clinch it through the last few moments. So yeah, really, really exciting gameplay there, and thank you for giving some insights into it. We also had the opportunity to get some more insights into the development of the boss when I sat down earlier with two of the artists from the Milky Tea team to talk about how they designed the boss from concept all the way through to its final appearance. So join us for that, and we'll be back in a bit. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today. We're going to talk about the art behind Grit and Valor and the team behind that art. So I'm actually joined by two members of the team over at Milky Tea, Luke and Richard. Thank you so much for making the time. Would you care to introduce yourself, Luke, to our audience?
I'm Luke. I'm the lead artist on Grit and Valor.
Richard. I'm concept artist on Grit and Valor.
Fantastic. And again, thank you so much for making the time today. What does being a lead artist at Milky Tea mean? What's a day look like for you?
A lot of the time it's different every day. I've been a generalist for the past decade, so it kind of suits me down to the ground. But it's anything from sort of syncing up with design and code and obviously the art team, about making sure they're all kind of got this cohesive direction and vision for what we're trying to achieve, from sort of hitting the right notes for the players that we're trying to appeal to sort of more hands-on stuff like still creating assets for the game and getting them implemented in the engine.
Right, so you do it all, basically, the coordination, but you still get your hands dirty and create things as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, just could never make my mind up about specializing into anything. So
Sure. Cool. And Richard, can you tell me a bit more about being a concept artist?
Yeah, I guess that's where I come in. I'm more of a specialist as opposed to a generalist. So I mainly specialize on like hard surface design, mechs and props because of my engineering background. And a day-to-day for me is usually I would like receive a design brief from the level designers or the design team. Then I'd have a kick-off meeting with Luke usually, and we'll discuss art direction and any ideas that we want to go forward with. Then I would then do some sketches, and well, before that I would do some reference gathering and research, then do some mind mapping and doodling, then create some sketches so everyone can see what the idea is about, and then we go from there essentially and do iterations.
Fantastic. It sounds like a very collaborative process where you're sort of working closely with the design team and getting feedback at different stages as you iterate. Is that right?
Oh yeah, very much so. So it's definitely collaborative and team effort, because even though I'm focused on the visuals, I definitely have to consider what animation do, like what animations we want in the design, and also like VFX. And it's also thinking a lot about gameplay functionality and storytelling and how that ties in with the visuals. So there is a lot of things going on. It's not solely just based on the visuals themselves, but at the end of the day, it is to try and make the mechs as cool as possible.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beauties of definitely the indie space and like smaller teams, is you have those small sort of tight-knit pods of people where you can work really closely with code and design as an artist as well, and sort of the combination of everyone's efforts kind of comes together really nicely.
Brilliant, thank you. So as the lead artist, live by any particular mantras or principles that you try and carry over to each project, or is that something you work out at the start of a project? How do you sort of approach things, broadly speaking?
Probably the most fundamental one is you've got to look at these things from the point of view of the player. All too common trap for art and sort of visuals kind of thing is to make things as big and flashy as possible, but sometimes that can sort of detract from gameplay, and in the wrong context, that's as like a detriment to the visuals or what you're trying to achieve. So quite often it's try and keep it simple and sort of like focused, and whatever you're doing, you're trying to go into it with that kind of focus that you're representing the design and you're trying to show off like the excellent coding behind it all. But yeah, just a real clarity of vision and focus about what you want the player to feel is probably what the most fundamental thing about all of this is.
Right, thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, you very professionally segued into one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which is at the beginning of this specific project, the first boss that players will encounter at the end of the British Isles. Going into it, were your goals? What kind of feelings did you want to invoke in the player with the way that the boss and the level around it was presented?
Yeah, because this is sort of the first boss that you're seeing. You're sort of getting to the end of the region. It's sort of a big moment for the player. But obviously, you've slogged your way down the British Isles through thick and thin, and maybe the first time you're sort of getting to that point, being a roguelike game, we don't want to completely bombard you with a load of new mechanics at that point. So it is sort of around that simplicity, but we still want it to feel like a big achievement and sort of like grand moment. So we wanted to have a really clear focus, and the narrative was that you were trying to get to this scientist to help you build the EMP that is sort of like one of the main objectives of the game, is to sort of get that to New Germany. So we sort of discussed some boss fights that we found really influential and sort of like cool moments that we found really influential. And like, for me, the Battle of Hoth was always a great moment of seeing this huge, the AT-ATs kind of going through the snow haze and appearing on the very edge, and they're after the shield generator. So there's a sort of like nod to that in all of this, where this huge Axis war machine is sort of looming towards you. And it's very reminiscent of the game's storyline, where it's this big behemoth of destruction kind of heading down and barreling down on this, and it's this plucky resistance force that has to try and like stand in the way of that. And that way we could, with the visuals, focus on this thing needs to be big and imposing. We always try and pull reference from what the boss and the general's design is, as well as the region. So being the British Isles, the Royal Navy is always synonymous with the British Isles, as well as levels themselves. We've got the trains themes and that kind of stuff. So the boss design is sort of this giant sort of battleship sort of train with a sort of like large ram and sort of like large figurehead of the Axis symbol on the front. So yeah, it kind of gets that bulky, indomitable feeling across as it sort of like trundles down to get the scientists in the lab.
Yeah, no, all of those inspirations make sense. Thank you for sharing. Richard, could you tell us a bit about your contributions to the boss and how you helped bring the feeling of the scale of the boss and how imposing it might be?
Yeah, so a lot of it was playing around with like the scale and the size of it, and also the weapon systems. So it has that battleship look to it, but also, like as Luke was saying, at the front it has the ram, because that's part of the gameplay functionality. But the contributions I made were thinking about more like how it would attack, and that would be the different types of weapon systems it would use. So as you know, in the game we have explosive, ballistic, and flamer types of attacks, and so it was trying to incorporate those three different kinds of attacks into this mammoth boss, essentially. And then also with the defensive functionality ability, it was thinking about how we could visually communicate that. And I guess the simplest method would to have shields for it, and similar to sort of like a turtle. That's how I see it, because the way it's shielded, so it would deploy its shields and huddle down. That would give it its defensive state, and hopefully that communicates to the players that it's quite invulnerable at that point. And the last point was at the front of the mech boss is that ram that has that train inspiration, and that is used to ram the building. And yeah, and that's pretty much it, essentially. Those were my main contributions, I would say. Yeah.
That's a really insightful point as well, the visual cues. So how do you balance aesthetics that you want to communicate with the practicalities of okay, we need to hint to the players this is how the boss is going to behave, so that sort of subtly cues them on how to interact with it. So you mentioned, for example, 3 different styles of attack that it has that align with the 4 types in the game. How did you approach creating those visual cues?
Keeping things as obvious as possible, and as Richard said, sort of it huddled down into this different state, changing the silhouette of it and giving it much more of that turtle kind of star fort style. I mean, Richard, you did an excellent job on figuring out the concertina armor plates and that kind of stuff, and the animation team did a great job of figuring out how all that kind of folds in together, as well as sort of like modeling from one of our modelers, Aidan. But yeah, trying to get that strong silhouette change of those different states was a real sort of key point, as well as sort of the logistics of just trying to get it to straddle that suspension of disbelief that this thing's works and that it is doable, right? Especially with the sort of genre that we're going for and that sort of diesel punk aesthetic. We don't want to stray too far into the world of fantasy or sci-fi or anything like that. So there's a real effort to try and get these mechanical things working, and it's what, Richard, with your engineering degree, like, it's been invaluable to help sort of flesh out sort of like more of those mechanisms.
Oh, really cool. Oh, well, you've inadvertently thrown Rich under the bus there by dropping the fact he's got an engineering degree, because I really want to hear more about that. Something I heard while speaking with other members of the Milky Tea team was, understanding is there is some engineering influence in a number of the designs, and some effort being made to, okay, it's diesel punk, it's obviously alternate reality, but the degree of engineering realism built into the designs, deliberately so. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think when it comes to design for me, because I have quite a lot of years experience in engineering, it's a bit more intuitive, and I kind of see it ahead without thinking too much about it, like how it might be manufactured, or like the thicknesses of materials and proportions and scale, or how it might assemble. But all that is kind of just going on in my head as opposed to explaining it or having it written down. So that engineering aesthetic or look or that believability kind of just comes through the design, I feel, for myself. It just seems relatively intuitive for me just because I've been doing engineering for so long. It's almost like a habit, I would say, for myself.
Well, I mean, the fact that comes through naturally is really, really cool.
Well, I wouldn't say it was naturally at first, but having done it for X number of years, it does become a habit. So yes. Yeah.
Right, got it. So in terms of practical stages and steps for designing something like this, the boss, what does that process look like?
Well, no, I mean, this is sort of what we alluded to earlier as well. Sort of, that's the nice thing about being in those smaller indie teams is from the very beginning of the concept phase, it's a lot more collaborative. So we tend to sort of start off with kickoff calls where we can talk about ideas pretty freely about what would be a cool climactic moment that we want the player to feel at the end of the region. And anyone's kind of like open to sort of pitch those ideas, and sort of the nitty gritty of them is definitely handled by design. But how we represent those things visually, we normally have someone from all the 3 departments sort of there to talk about those things and sort of flesh out each other's ideas about how each of these could work, and then we sort of tend to try and whittle it down to 3 possible avenues that we could explore. And then we sort of go to prototyping phase to see if logistically this would work. How does it feel? Does it feel fun? Which is probably the most important part of that. And seeing those early prototypes really helps us to sort of think about what parts we need to visualize to the player, what bits are quite complicated to grasp and maybe we need to rework, or maybe we need more like a different type of visual reinforcement about, we want the player to go over here or understand what's about to happen is really dangerous. And then once we've got the skeleton of this thing good and it feels fun, it feels enjoyable to play, then we can sort of start getting into the nitty gritty of how do we have shields that fold out from the legs, and how does this thing move, and how do we want to reload these turrets and have the weapons switching and that kind of stuff, which is definitely where sort of Richard, we start to get you involved and we give Richard a bit more of a defined brief about what's going on there.
Right, yeah, no, I think like you said earlier, very collaborative. I suppose the nice thing about overlapping so much with other members of the team in the studio is you must get sort of inspiration and creative moments that pop up organically just through talking with colleagues.
Definitely there's moments where you sort of, well, that's a nice idea, but maybe not for this one, and put that in the back pocket for later, or hang on to that concept.
Awesome. In terms of scale, obviously all of the mechs in the game up until this point within a 1x1 square on the grid in the maps. Are there any challenges when it came to the sheer size of this thing?
Well, a normal mech is about 1 tile by 1 tile, and this one's sort of 3x3, but it's sort of upwards as well, 3x3, so we've got this huge monolithic thing. I mean, it's originally interesting it would be 2x2, but when we sort of got it in game and sort of in that prototyping and sort of early white boxing phase, it just didn't quite have the impact we wanted. So very kindly, Code agreed to let's go bigger. Which was more pathfinding kind of issues that they had to figure out, but I think it's well worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it certainly comes across in the gameplay as players are going to find out for themselves very shortly. That's very cool. I have to jump around a little bit here, but we've alluded to aesthetics that are belonged by a game that's diesel punk in its visuals. What's it like to work on a diesel punk game? Is that something that appeals to you? Is it new, or have you done something like that before?
I've loved, there's a lot of other diesel punk games that I've played before, and I think the combination of mechs is just natural fit for that, especially sort of like the background of diesel punk tends to be sort of during the World Wars, and going with this alternate history we can kind of explore that a little bit better. And I think we've definitely got that kind of gritty somberness of this alternate future where things didn't really pan out so good, which is a wonderful backdrop for the more heroic moments and sort of the setting that we're and the storyline we're going for, that you are this kind of plucky set of allies that against the odds that you're going to try and take down the Axis forces. So it does sort of conjure up some of that, and that romanticized World War II imagery, and it's in the name itself, like Grit and Valor, so it's got the two halves of that, which is really fun to work with. And mechs are cool, right? Yeah. Who doesn't love mechs?
Mechs are very cool, especially the ones you guys are making. They're super, super cool. Richard, same question. Are you enjoying working on this project? What do you like about it the most, and feel about the diesel punk aesthetic?
I get to draw and design mechs all day, so that's pretty cool in itself. I think that's what I love about working on this game. With the diesel punk aesthetic, it's a bit more new to me. Because of my engineering background, I'm usually more interested in science fiction, But Diesel Punk was a nice challenge to approach. I have, for my personal projects, I have done stuff like steampunk and biopunk, but not Diesel Punk. But it's a similar language, but then it's just adapting yourself to like using different shapes and different proportions and compositions to fit within the project, which is fine. It's just all referring back to principles of design and art.
Right, yeah, so applying sort of ideas that you're already familiar with in new contexts.
That's
Very
right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Are there any learnings that you've taken from your experience working on this particular boss that you're carrying forward might sort of come to fruition later bosses that players are going to see?
So yeah, working on this boss was definitely a challenge in some areas, mainly like the weapon systems and its defense, like how it will deploy its shield and how would animation do that, and whether to make it as complicated as possible or just to keep things simple, whether I want the animation team to like me or hate me, essentially. But what I learned from the British Isles boss is how we did the animations and the weapon systems and how we could apply that to the other bosses and how they share a similar idea but almost like wrap it in a different package, which is kind of what we do with the other bosses, but we still have to make it fresh and exciting and different at the same time. There was a lot of learning that I took from it, less so on the visuals I guess, but more so on animations and VFX and how that can be applied to the other bosses.
Bosses are, for one sort of like big showpiece, they are incredibly complicated to kind of pull off, I think. I mean, things like the boss sort of like walking down at the moment, because it's so large and lumbering and slow, one sort of issue that we had was how slow the steps were. Normally when you have sort of like the animation transitions, you can do it quite quickly and it sort of takes care of a lot of that. But because it was so slow and deliberate, we had to really figure out how we go from maybe the front left leg forward or the front right leg forward, having to sort of do complex trees and how to then move that into a shielded state and all this kind of stuff. So there are a sort of like minefield of surprises that you're not really necessarily expecting. So going forwards, definitely we learned a lot from this first boss, and I think, not to give too much away, but I think our bosses sort of get more exciting and more sort of showy.
Excellent. Okay, that's a nice hint at what's to come. I'm also tempted to say a lot more about upcoming bosses, but I think we'll keep that under our hats for the time being and let the players cover that very soon. I think that's actually almost everything we've got time for today, but anything that you guys wanted to mention or sort of say to the players, we wrap things up.
I hope you have fun. I hope you enjoy the game.
Great, yeah, cool. Yeah, that's kind of the main thing, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, I mean,
awesome.
We're always open to feedback, and we've got the Discord channels as well, which we do read, always check pretty regularly, just to sort of get people's thoughts. We're not so massive a team that we're not able to kind of like react to those things, and yeah, it's great to hear what people think of it.
Excellent. Well, gents, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure our players will enjoy hearing everything that you've had to say about the boss and your approach to artwork and design at Milky Tea. So again, thank you so much for your time. We're going to wrap things up for now, but everyone watching, we hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye. All right, we hope you enjoyed that conversation that I shared with Rich and Luke from the art team over at Milky Tea. In case you're just joining us mid-show, this is a special live stream for the British Isles Boss Reveal, and we just had a really cool chat with two of the artists behind the making of it. And now I'm joined once again by George, and you're going to talk us through some more art of the boss. Actually, we're sharing this time some concepts and behind the scenes stuff that's going to detail how the boss was developed from sort of the initial ideas and seeing how those grew over time. So yeah, really looking forward to this this segment. Mate, would you like to start? I'm going to swap us over now and show the first image. Could you talk us through what we're looking at?
Yeah, sure. So this is one of our very, very initial sketches for the boss mech. So this was done by the art team before they'd had that conversation with the design team to talk about the level. So it originally started as a biped where they basically just wanted to scale up the mechs that you use throughout the game. We just wanted this enormous kaiju-esque scale for them. But then we moved on to our next piece of concept art, where they added this whole new dynamic to make it unique. So they turned it into a giant quadruped, which, yeah, I think instantly makes it more menacing.
Yeah,
but then,
for sure.
But then on the next stage, so they they spoke to the design team about their ideas for the way the boss level would play out, and then this dynamic of an on rails train car comes in. So it sort of ties into the narrative as well. So Harmsworth, the enemy general that you're fighting against, he was a big media baron. So the idea was that this train car was going to be his ostentatious form of transport around the UK, but it also doubled up as a mech. So I thought this train form was like really, really cool. But it's not quite right. It's not as menacing as the mech form. So
No,
I think
it is really cool, and yeah, we can already see, like you say, how the art team were working with the design team to get some of these core ideas across. So yeah, sense of scale being really important in the beginning, but then, like you said, even though the original version looked a lot like essentially just a huge version of the mech players had seen already, they then swapped to something that was new and scary and different, like say with the four legs, and then yeah, as we see as we saw earlier on in the gameplay, it moves sort of in one direction along the track. So there's sort of a bit of what's the word I would use, a carryover from that initial concept now in the gameplay with the train idea. But yeah, how did it evolve from there?
So then, once they'd spoken to the art team, the design team, sorry, they started talking about the different ways in which it interact with the player, basically. So all of these different turrets that we're seeing now, these are the ways in which the boss mech deals with your individual unit types. So you've got like a mortar fire to deal with your team. You've got flamethrower, machine gun turrets. So this essentially becomes a amalgamation of your three mechs in one, which is again a very, very terrifying adversary to face off against.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is. Like I say, like we were saying earlier on, it presents a unique challenge that players just haven't, up until that point, haven't seen anything like. So I think it will catch a lot of people by surprise. And also, can we just take a moment to appreciate how awesome all of these drawings are? I love seeing the thought processes and these kinds of designs that you don't always get a look at when you're following various games. Just the amount of work and sketches that go into things that contribute but don't necessarily actually make it into the final cut of a game is really, really awesome to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Like our art team work massively collaboratively. So I think there were 3 concept artists on this. So Luke, Richard, and Nate all worked together to get it to its final form.
Yeah, fantastic. Huge shout out to those guys. All right, George, thank you so much for talking us through that. I think we're about ready to move on to our final, is that right? Yeah, final segment of the show already. That has absolutely flown by. So I'm going to bring back Sophie. Thank you for being here once again. And we're going to give George a little rest, a little break before seeing him again right at the end. So, Sophie, what's coming up next?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the demo, feedback, recap. If you had a chance to play Grit and Valor's demo, it was out for some time. Then the dev took all of your feedback that we got through Discord, social media, Steam forums, survey. I'll put that together. And now we're going to talk about how that will impact changes that are upcoming into the game. So basically, all of the community feedback we received, has influenced greatly what is coming in Grit and Valor, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Okay, so let's dive right into it. There are a lot of changes that Milky Tea are working on in response to feedback that came through the demo that we ran for 1 month in July, I think it was. So yeah, one of the big things for us were the rewards. So as it stands in the game, or as it stood at the time of the demo, most of the rewards you were getting, say, during a run, were at the end of each mission, where you had a chance to pick an enhancement that would change, say, the amount of damage your mechs were dealing, how fast they would move, that kind of thing. And to spice that up, basically, they're looking at increasing the frequency at which players get rewarded and feel the consequences of their efforts. So that means mid-run rewards are being looked at, i.e. you're in the middle of a level during a mission, and there'll be upgrades that are quote unquote dropped. Now the specifics of how this works are still being hashed out, but they'll be dropped, and it'll be up to the player to decide whether they want to risk grabbing that additional upgrade to customize their squad further during the run. Obviously that will come at some risk because maybe you're going out of your way, you might not be able to defend one of the objectives at the same time, or you might be risking your command vehicle, that kind of thing. It just makes the whole decision-making process a bit more dynamic in that way. And then the other big one, and I think this is really cool. So I'm a huge Hades fan. I don't know if you are, Sophie. I think you've played Hades.
Yes.
I think we talked about it before. So for anyone who has played that game, the Daedalus Hammer is sort of what we're replicating here. Now, what that means is a style of upgrade that rather than say a percentage change to your damage or your armor or health, this will quite fundamentally change the way that the abilities of your pilots work. So I'm trying to give an example. Say the mech jump. I don't have specific examples because these are still being worked on, but it will affect the pilot abilities. Maybe you get to jump a second time or whatever it is. And I feel like these are going to switch things up in a really, really major way. So yeah, looking forward to those. And then the third element of these reward improvements are improving those enhancements that I mentioned that you get between missions. So it will be things like, rather than, like say, just having those flat percentage increases, making those a bit more interesting as well, changing the effects that they have on your mechs, and also making them a bit more synergistic so that you can really customize and stylize the build that you're going for. And yeah, all of that is going to dramatically change the game. So yeah, looking forward to it. But yeah, our next change is on the topic of pilots' abilities. So Sophie.
Yes, so you have mentioned it briefly, but more pilots and abilities. If you've played the demo, you've seen that the demo had 4 pilots. Each had their own unique ability that came with that pilot. So Milky Tea is working on increasing variety of that combination. So they're looking at options like duplicate pilot abilities, perhaps, within the squad, adding more abilities to these pilots, perhaps. So each of those options potentially would offer more content you could unlock throughout the game, and that would add also a layer of variety, which I think is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that actually. My favorite ability is the jump. I kind of suck with the mines. I never place them properly. I'm not really anticipating well enough, but I do just love jumping across the map and stomping on the enemy units.
Yes.
If I could just have 3 of those, or even 2, that would be
I
great.
love it.
The next thing is the opening experience. So people who are playing the game for the very first time. In the demo, the way it was in the tutorial is that you started off with just the one mech and you can sort of learning the controls, moving it around, shooting down cardboard cutout enemies, which is very funny. But then the first live mission, you've got to juggle 3 mechs and the command vehicle. So that's 4 units that you're trying to move all at the same time. And it was just a big jump in sort of what we're expecting the player to manage. So the idea is that we smooth out that learning curve, make it a bit less steep, and more gradually onboard that complexity. That's also going to come along with improvements to the UI generally, just to make it a bit more new player friendly. So that was a big learning for us as well. We don't want anyone making that jump and then suddenly feeling overwhelmed and dropping out. So that's
I
the
can't
idea
wait
behind
to
that.
see that. Nice.
Yeah, I think it'll be a big help. And another place where we're making sort of the user experience a bit more streamlined is with the mech yard and the scrap yard. So previously you would spend the scrap that you've earned, which is the currency you're buying modules with to upgrade your mechs. You would buy that stuff at the scrap yard and then go over to this separate location at the hub in your base called the mech yard to then apply those modules to your mechs. And it was it just felt like a step too many. So we're looking at mashing those together into one location so that all of your mech upgrades are done in the same place. Like I say, just to streamline things a little bit.
Really cool. And on to another topic, but also a way to offer, I would say, a good experience for an audience that is a bit more casual. Milky Tea is also working on a more forgiving difficulty. So this one will be more stat-based. It will allow players to maintain, current level of challenge for players that prefer it that way. So it would be something like a casual mode for newcomers that want to just get, a first experience and feeling of Grit and Valor. So can't wait to see that one too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another change coming actually to the hub that I didn't mention before. So this one's really exciting. It's the command center. So anyone who did play the demo might have noticed an empty lot effectively. And what's going to be built there is the command center. So this is a new area on the hub for upgrading your command vehicle. So at the moment, well, I say in the demo, your command vehicle mostly just sort of moved around until it died. It did have the ability to heal the mechs around it, but it was a pretty vulnerable unit. So to make that a bit more exciting, it's going to receive its very own set of upgrades,
I like
an
that.
upgrading system. So it can be a bit more of a, how do I put this? It can contribute a bit more to the team on the battlefield. So yeah, really looking forward to that one.
Me too. I can't wait to see how that's going to change combat for sure. So I'm going to jump into something different regarding the region map. So region map will have changes. You know how right now you can have, your path, and sometimes you have narrative nodes. Well, we're working on a change on there too regarding those nodes. Their narrative nodes would be random. So having an option to choose a node that you have missed opportunity for spontaneous moments. So what that means is Milky Tea is addressing this by having more choices, more strategy, more variety to the region map. So from there, the exploration is designed to make this more natural, I would say. So when those nodes arise in the story, it makes sense, right? So something to look forward to.
Nice. Yeah, I think that'll make the runs feel, like I say, natural is the right word for it, because as it stood, you would pick when you wanted a sort of narrative event to happen, and that felt a little bit artificial, whereas now they're popping up much in the way they would in real life, sort of unexpected things happening. So that's great. On the topic of unexpected events, there's nothing worse than losing your mech mid-run and then feeling like, oh man, do I even you know you've got to pick the next battle and you're feeling like you're on the back foot. Obviously, there comes a point where that's kind of inevitable towards the end of your run, and it sort of makes sense that you're sort of fighting through to the last degree. But just so it's a bit less of a feel bad in the sort of early and mid parts of your run, we're taking another look at reviving your mechs and giving you that ability to bring them back. So we're going to be rebalancing the region map nodes and the starting currency to make that easier to do. It did exist in the demo, but it was really tough, especially if you lost a mech early on. So we're going to make adjustments to that as well. There's another point about the gameplay that I think is really important to mention, and that's the time controls. So we saw a lot of people saying, "Oh, hey, I only noticed quite well into my gameplay session that you can change, you can keybind a button that allows you to pause the game." And I don't mean pause as in open up the main menu. Pause the level, issue commands, and then unpause to sort of strategize a bit more. So if you do want to play that way, that option has always been there, but we're going to make it much more prominent than it was in the demo so that everyone is sort of aware of that mechanic. It does change the game quite dramatically if you choose to play that way. So yeah, we're building those time controls a bit more into the onboarding experience, into the UI. I think there's also an option to sort of speed up and slow down the game as well. So yeah, we're making that a lot more accessible and easy to understand. Like I say, I think that. changes the game in a big way.
Were you pausing the game a lot yourself
Um,
in the demo when you were playing?
I tried playing both ways, so I quite liked the added challenge of doing everything in real time, and I think some people will enjoy playing that way. It adds a lot of pressure to those moments, those sort of clutch moments where you're on the brink of
Yeah.
having your command vehicle destroyed. But at the same time, I also enjoyed runs where I was able to pause and think very carefully. I was able to be a lot more strategic, and go a lot further with a less upgraded squad when I was able to pause mid-battle and see, okay, my mech here is being attacked from, say, elevation or by a mech that's got a type advantage. I'll move it out the way. Those kinds of decisions are really hard to make when you've got no
Yeah.
time. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was a different way to play, but I also enjoyed it. So I think making that option clearer for players will be a big deal.
Well said. Well
Yeah.
said. And that's a lot of features, but there's so much that we will be giving into details, into further social media posts, blogs, article perhaps. So be sure you stay tuned to our Steam page and Discord server, where we're just gonna, go over each of those changes in more details and answer any of the questions you may have. So I guess on this topic, we want to thank you again for your support, everybody from the community and also the ambassadors that have been working with us from the start, just providing feedback on each of the builds. We're really looking forward to your feedback on the next steps that we have. So over the coming weeks, we'll be sure to dive in more into details with you guys. And by the way, if you want to help with any of those changes and share your feedback, the ambassador program that we have is still open to application. So you can check it out on Discord or through the Megabit website. Send us a message and you'll be also...
Okay, well, that's just about all we've got time for on today's show. We really hope you've enjoyed watching, and I'm going to take this moment to thank my two co-hosts for supporting me throughout this whole show. If you did only just join us or you joined partway through, you have missed a lot, so we would encourage you to watch the show back and catch up on all the good stuff that we shared. We actually started this show by sharing the gameplay of the British Isles boss for the very first time, so do check that out. And that was actually followed up by an interview that we had with two members of the art team from Milky Tea, Luke and Rich, who very kindly gave some insights into what designing the boss was like, what their approach was. And that I found a really cool conversation. And we followed that up with some additional context into the design of the boss from George, yourself, mate. You talked us through some concept artwork that kind of laid out a timeline of how the boss was developed over time. So I found that really insightful, really interesting. Do check that out. And finally, Sophie, you led a segment where we summarized changes and features that are being added to the game off the back of feedback we received from the demo earlier this year, and lots of really cool, exciting content to come. So yeah, I've really enjoyed being here today. Thank you so much, both. Sophie, any final notes you'd like to add before we wrap things up?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you so much for having us today. And yes, I do have some things to remind our viewers here if you have missed the segment on that earlier. So we have a Gleam competition underway where you can win a Steam Deck. So be sure you check out our socials, Discord, everywhere to get a chance to win that Steam Deck. And also the beta signups are open if you want to have a chance to play the game, check out what's coming for Grit and Valor, and also share your feedback with the dev team. Same thing, follow our socials, check out the info in the video description, how to sign up. And yeah, thank you so much again for watching, guys, today, and we can't wait to show you what's to come for Grit and Valor.
Awesome. And then finally from me, so thanks again, Bruce and Sophie, for having me. And then on behalf of everyone here at Milky Tea, we just want to thank you all for your support and feedback on Grit and Valor 1949 so far. It's really, really spurring us on during development, and we just wanted you to know how much we appreciate it. We're going to end now with some exciting more gameplay of the boss battle, but this time provided by one of our ambassadors, 7 Myths. So thanks again, guys.